commercial. This probably came out like in the 90s, more than likely. Sarah McLachlan, y'all probably don't know who she is, right? Samuel has no idea who she is. Guys, listen up. She used to be very, very, very famous. Now I don't know if people know who she is. But you hear this song, and suddenly your heart begins to break, and then you see a cat missing an eye. Or you see a dog that's been abused, and you're like, oh, snap. Here we go. Take my money, right? How many of you wanted to give away all of your money just now? Yeah, just about every one of us in here. Why? Because you see these animals and you're like, oh, I have to care. I have to care. I have to do something. I'm going to be honest with you. In real life, if I walk down the street and I see someone beating their dog, I'm ready to go fight, right? I am ready to step up, kick them in their shin, and take the dog away from them and run away. Because I love dogs. If that happens to a cat, I don't know what will happen. But if that happens to a dog, you better believe I'm doing something about it, right? Because I care about animals. But I have another thought. If we walk down the street and we see a human beating up another human, are we willing to do something about it? Why would we be willing to give away all of our money to save an animal when we wouldn't do the same for the neighbor sitting beside us? Now, it's not just you. Humans across the board are guilty of this. That's why we go to war. That's why we fight. That's why we try to step on each other's throats to make it to the top. Why don't we care for people the way we should, Joel? Why don't we love people the way we should, Sasha? Tonight, I encourage you to do one thing. You have to care. You have to care. You have to notice people that are struggling. You have to notice people who are hurting. You have to notice people who don't have it all together. You have to notice people who have lost a loved one, or notice people who failed a test, or notice people who don't have it all together. Notice people who are caught up in their sin and they don't know where to turn. You have to notice. If we want to be like Jesus, we have to notice. That's what we're learning tonight. We're learning to love like Jesus, and my heart for 2020 is just that. I want you, I want myself, I want our leaders, I want us to care. We have to care. We have to care. There are people all over this world like those puppy dogs who are being beaten, who are being abused, who are hurting, who are in pain. And if we don't do something about it, who will? Tonight, I'm not here to take up your money. We're going to receive an offering, of course, but that's not why we're here. Tonight, I'm here because I encourage you. I implore you. Notice the people at your school. Notice your mom and dad who are struggling to put food on the table. Notice your cousins who don't have a great family situation and are just struggling. Notice the person who cuts you off in the hallway or knocks your books out of your hands. Notice them because they're crying out for help. And if you won't help them, I have to believe that they're not going to receive the help that they need. Today we have to care. Jesus cared. I want to share with you a story tonight in the Bible of who Jesus was and what he came to do. Jesus, he was perfect, you know. He always did things the right way. He always said the right things at the right time. He's much different than I am. You know, I make boneheaded choices a lot. I say stupid things a lot. I offend people without even trying to sometimes. And maybe you know what I'm talking about. But Jesus, he wasn't like that. He spoke to the heart over and over and over again. He came not only to fix our lives, but to make our lives completely better, Samuel. He came to set this world free, free from ourselves, free from our sin. And tonight, he came to heal. He came to reach out to someone who was in desperate need, and if they didn't receive a touch from Christ, they would die. We see Jesus walking with the synagogue leaders because one of the religious leaders' daughters was deathly sick. So the religious leader grabs Jesus and they said, hey, let's go. We got to go. If you don't intervene, all hope is lost. And so Jesus is making his way to the house, and he navigates his way through a big crowd. And in that time and in that moment, something dramatic happens. Everybody was touching Jesus in this moment, brushing shoulders, probably kicking up dust on his lovely feet, tapping him on the shoulder so he could look the other way. You know what I'm talking about, right? When the next thing you know, this lady who many considered to be unclean, this sick lady reached out with her hand and touched Jesus. In that moment, Jesus feels the power from his body leave him and go into this lady, and it changed her life. So much so that Jesus noticed the moment and he stopped. Now you need to know something. The place he was going, the lady was deathly ill. It was a 12-year-old girl. If Jesus wouldn't have arrived quickly, she would die. But Jesus stopped because he knew he had to care. So let's go and look at that together. Mark chapter 5. We're going to be reading quite a bit tonight, verses 21 through 36 actually. But you need to hear the full story. I think something powerful happens when we read the scripture. I can get creative with this message. I can give you all kinds of amazing illustrations and really heartfelt moments like what you saw on the video. But you know what? All that fails in comparison to what the scriptures have to say. The scriptures have a story to tell. And I think we need to read those, right, Brianna? You think those are important? Absolutely. So let's look at those together. When Jesus had crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. That's what Jesus does. Jesus cares. He cares what you're going through. He cares what this family's going through. He cares about this daughter who's on her deathbed. That's who he is. That's what he does. So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there. A woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. That is a long time to be sick, 12 years. Could you imagine if your nose was bleeding for 12 years? No, that'd be awful. Now, I'm not going to explain the type of bleeding or anything like that tonight. I don't think that's important to the story, and it's a little graphic. But what if you got cut playing hockey on your eyebrow, and that bled for 12 years? What if you skinned your knee sliding into a base during a softball practice, and that bled for 12 years? What if someone punched you in the mouth and your tooth comes out and your mouth bleeds for 12 years? You're going to be losing a lot of blood, and that sounds awful, right? Side note for this lady. Because of her bleeding, she was considered unclean in this culture. That means people didn't touch her. That means people didn't hang out with her. That means either she was married and got divorced, because that's what you do in the culture. If you can't have a child, or if something happens to you and you bleed, you get a divorce. Or this bleeding occurred before she ever even got married, meaning she would never get married. Difficult situation. Let me unpack it even more. This lady had been going to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor. She spent all of her life savings trying to get well, and none of it worked. So she was poor, she was broken, she was needing some help. She didn't know where to turn. Doctors didn't help. The people didn't want anything to do with her. The only hope she had was in Jesus. And the woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. And now remember, Jesus is on his way to a house to heal someone. This is what he does. At once, Jesus realized that the power had gone from his body. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Crowd of people everywhere. They were following him. It was more than one person who touched his clothes. And the disciples say that. They're like, you see the people crowding against you, and yet you ask, who touched me? It's kind of ironic. Can you imagine walking through your school, high school, or your middle school, and you're trying to get to class, but everybody else is trying to get to class too, and people bump into you? Walking to class, at least 20 people touch you on your way to calculus or algebra 2 or English, social studies. I mean, how are you to differentiate between that many people? But Jesus knew. Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus and the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they had said, Jesus told them, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Before I get to what happens in the rest of the story, I want to talk about this lady who was so desperate for Jesus that she did whatever she could to receive her healing. Can you imagine that? Being broken for 12 straight years. Being in pain for 12 straight years. Being alone for 12 straight years. Experiencing a sense of shame for 12 years. Feeling like there's no answers in sight. Feeling like there's no hope. But if I could just get to the one who can save, maybe. Now, we don't understand what this lady is going through after this time, but I think we do understand the feeling of shame. I think we do understand the feeling of being alone. I think we do understand the feeling of being broken. I think we all know what it's like to be in a hopeless situation. I think as I was telling her story tonight, some of you could easily connect with it because you're like, I know I'm not bleeding, but I just lost someone. My best friend just hurt me. I don't feel like I have a good relationship with my mom or dad. I feel like I'm all by myself in this life, and I don't know where to turn. I don't know where to go to. I don't know who to reach out to. Tonight, Jesus knows exactly where you're at, and he's here to help. And if you say, that's what I'm going through, God, he's going to stop. He has a plan. He's working out that plan. He has an agenda. But if you call on his name, he stops. He stops. And because of your faith in him, he can make you whole. But you got to reach out to him. You got to reach out your hand. You got to go where he's at. If y'all know what this lady is going through, man, that's a good thing. Can I tell you that? It's never fun to go through bad things. I'm not saying that. But it is important to understand when bad things happen and how they make you feel. Because you know what that builds? Compassion. Compassion. If you know what it's like to suffer, you can relate to someone else who is suffering. If you know what it's like to be in pain, you know what it's like for someone else to be in pain. If you know what it's like to be broke and have no money to buy food, man, you're going to understand your neighbor who's going through the same thing. And if you understand what failure feels like, you're going to be able to understand what someone else is going through when they fail. Compassion is an important thing. If we're to love people and love what people are going through, guess what? We have to be able to relate to them. And when we see people hurting, we offer compassion. And we try to help. You might give $18 to save a struggling dog. As you watch that video, The Arms of an Angel from 1998, you want to help. Tonight, students, there are people in this world who are like this lady. They might be battling cancer. They might have got punched in the eye. Their best friend might have just walked out on them. Their boyfriend or girlfriend might have just broke up with them. Maybe they experienced a death in the family. I don't know. But if you understand what it's like to go through hard times, you can help that person going through a hard time. But you got to care. If we want to love like Jesus, we got to care and we got to stop, even if we have something that we got to do. Jesus stopped and he said, looked at that lady and said, your faith made you whole. Go in peace. Your life will be better now. The lady walked away, completely whole. She received from Jesus what the doctors could never give her. And now her life would be forever changed. I don't know what happens in this lady's life from here on out. She might have got married. She could actually start saving money because she doesn't have to go to the doctor all the time. But most importantly, she experienced a life-transforming touch of Jesus, and it changed her. If you're Jairus, however you want to say his name, Jairus, sounds better, actually. That's great. You just witnessed a miracle. But your daughter's on the deathbed. And now you receive the news that your daughter have passed away. Man, that's devastating. That's sad, isn't it? But Jesus says, don't be afraid. Believe. He walks over to the house where this young lady had died. The professional mourners are already there. Believe it or not, that was a profession back in the day. And they were crying and wailing, and tears were flowing, and they were screaming, and a sad moment. Jesus walks into the room, grabbed the girl by the hand, and just so you know, that's considered unclean. You're not supposed to touch a dead body, but Jesus does because he cares. And he says, spirit, return to this body. The spirit comes back into her body, and she wakes up, and she's living again. The 12-year-old girl returns back to normal. How about that? Jesus was going to heal this lady, and then he had to stop because he cared. And when all hope seemed lost for this family, for this daughter, he saved the day in that too. Jesus cared. He would stop. But he would also be the kind of guy who would bring someone back from the dead. That's who he was. He cared. So what can we learn from Jesus tonight? Jesus cared for the broken. And so should we. Jesus cared for the broken, and we should also. You know, Jesus was a man on a mission. He had things he had to get done. But when the moment arose, he stopped. Because he loves. Because he cares. Because he values everybody, not just the big and the famous. He cares for everything you go through. For every trial that you face, he cares and he's willing to help you. And I ask that you be willing to help someone else. If you need Christ tonight, man, we're going to pray with you. We want to pray with you. If you're broken tonight, that's why we're here, to help you get to God. But if you don't need that, we're also going to go into a prayer time where we're saying, God, help me to notice people the way you do. You know, if I'm in this crowd, I'm probably not going to notice this lady. I get overwhelmed by crowds. Like when I go to a big sporting event, like crowds, like, man, I'm like, don't touch me. Stop it. Stop it. Don't spill that beer on me. You know that happens. And I just try to get away from the big crowd. At Converge, Brianna thought I wanted to sit up at the top because I don't like large crowds, right? Wasn't the case. Wasn't the case at all. I, in my own natural mind, wouldn't notice someone in a big crowd, but Jesus does. So my prayer, God, help me to notice. Help me to notice. I gotta care. And for you, I hope you're in the same boat saying, man, my life might be going good right now, but I gotta care. I gotta see the way Jesus sees. As a student body in 2020, this is what I want for our group. This is kind of our heartbeat for the year. This is what I want us to do and to do well. I want us to notice people. As you come in here tonight, I want you to notice the people sitting by themselves. I want you to notice the people who might not have it all together. I want you to notice the people who might be here for the first time or might have come for 1,000,000 times and they're not connecting with anybody. I want you to notice them. Because if we don't, who will? As you walk into your school tomorrow, I want you to notice people. There are people out there who fail their tests and it's devastating to them. There are people out there whose parents just got divorced and it's hard to handle. There are people in your school system who their grandparents might have just gone to be with the Lord. There are people in your school who don't have it all together and they put on a pretty face saying, I'm good, I'm fine, there's nothing going wrong. But deep down, they're trying to decide whether they should commit suicide or not. We need to notice. We need to see. Because if we don't see, the ones who believe in Christ, if we don't open our eyes and see those who are lost, hurting, broken, in shame, in a prison, in addiction, in bondage, if we don't notice, who will? Who will? Vision for 2020. We got to care. We have to care. And honestly, if we can grasp this, it's going to change everything. It's going to change in how you give to Speed the Light. If you care about lost and broken people, when you give in the offering because you know your giving goes to our missionaries so that they can go and spread the gospel, you're probably going to give more than you ever have before. When you're in your campus, because I believe all of you can be a campus missionary, man, you're going to see people differently. When you come to church, you're not just going to come by yourself. You're going to say, man, I'm going to meet with Jesus tonight. And I know he can change lives because he's changed my life. I got to bring my friend because my friend needs God. And I can show her the way. I can show him the way. It's going to change everything. It's going to change everything. But we can't make you do it. I can't twist your arm and make you care about God. I can't twist your arm and make you raise your hands in worship. I can't force you to open your mouth in prayer. I can't do any of that. And if I tried, I would probably lose my job. And I should, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I hope you decide to care. You know, I've seen it far too often in teenage generations, and it's not just you. It was my generation. It's the generation before that. It's the generation before that. Teenagers just don't seem to care. We're apathetic. We're like, someone else do it. I just want to stay here and jump on my video game systems or go to practice, do what I got to do to get out. But teenagers, we got to care. We have to care.